Welcome back to Genestealer Cults 101, where today we're going to be talking about the Conceal rule. Hi guys, I'm Tom of 6++, and it is my pleasure to be back here again talking Genestealer Cults. Today I wanted to focus on one of the sort of core mechanics that the GSC have, which is the Conceal rule. If you play Genestealer Cults, then you probably do so partly for the love of ambushing and deep striking and shenanigans. And this is a crucial part of how Genestealer Cults as an army function and how they pull off their special kind of tricks and traps against the opponent. So it's a fundamental part of how they play the game. And typically a big chunk of your army is going to start the game off the board, and even more may join it as the game goes on. And so this is where the Conceal rule comes in, and it's worth always double checking which of your units have it, but I think the vast majority of units in the Genestealer Cults book now have the Conceal rule. And units with the Conceal rule have a choice. When you come to deploying, you can set them up in ambush, which means on the board but using blips, or you can set them up underground, which means in deep strike to come in subsequent turns. So we're going to start by talking about how ambush works, then we're going to move to think about how the underground side of things works. So, starting in ambush. Genestealer Cults are famous for sort of lurking and hiding and the opponent not really knowing where they're coming from. They've got the blips mechanic, which they have kept since 8th edition, which is very reminiscent of the moment from Aliens when the monsters are closing in and the trackers are trying to pick them up. I suspect that's where the homage comes from. And if you choose to set your units up in ambush, you are going to put down a blip token in their place on the board when it comes to deployment. Now, blip tokens must go in your own deployment zone, but they can go anywhere there. You have to place one for every unit you have set up in ambush, although if things are inside vehicles, you only set up one token. And these go down instead of your army. So this is quite effective in several different ways. It means your opponent doesn't know exactly what is going to be where. And it also gives you some tactical flexibility because blip markers are revealed either at the start of your turn, if you go first, or if you go second, at the end of your opponent's first movement phase. This, coupled with the fact that your opponent isn't allowed to come within 9 of any blip markers, gives you a lot of spoiling capacity in this first turn. You can hold the opponent back, they can't alpha strike into areas where you have blip tokens, but they also don't know exactly where your different units are going to be. And when you reveal the blip marker, you have to put one model within range of where the blip marker itself was, but then you're quite flexible after that. And so you can refuse flank, you can have a lot of melee on one side, shooting on the other to make a push in one particular area. And it gives you a lot of strategic flexibility. You have to be careful. You need to leave yourself pockets across the board where you're confident you can fit in your units safely and in a way that means when you do deploy, you're going to be able to avoid heavy enemy shooting. But you get a lot of flexibility with this. And it really allows you to pull some tricks in response to how your opponent has played their first turn. If they've come in very aggressively on one side, you can react and hit them back hard, or you can avoid them with key units that need to be out of harm's way as well. And it gives your characters a lot of flexibility in terms of where they start as well on the board, which is very nice, especially now we're an army that likes to do psychic secondaries and the like as well. Being able to have a patriarch in the right place at the right time can be extremely important to getting those early scores. So the ambush rule is extremely useful. It's particularly nice going second, which gives you a lot of power in that sense, and it does get in the opponent's head. So don't forget to try and spook the opponent and make a lot of noise about where things could be. That's a very important part of playing GSC, as is failing miserably and sort of having our grand plan fail to go off the way we hoped, and all of our units collapse and die. That seems to be the second part. But hey, that's what we're about. So that is deploying things in ambush. Now we'll move to thinking about deploying things underground. They came from below. Very important part of Genestealer Cults is launching your attacks from the sewers, from the rooftops, from wherever you've been hiding, and getting the jump on the opponent in the later rounds of the game. If you set a unit up in underground, then when it it essentially comes in from Deep Strike in round 2 or 3, and it has two choices. You can choose to come in up to 8 away from the opponent. You'll notice that's 1 inch closer than most armies are allowed to Deep Strike anything. But you can also choose to come in up to 6 away, much closer, and this comes at the cost of you not being able to charge that turn. So those are your two options. It's worth noting for new players, this only applies the first time you bring a Conceal unit in from underground. You have to think about the many ways that we have to bring things back into reserves, because there are a number. When we talk stratagems, we'll do these in more depth. But the first time a unit comes in, it can deploy like this, but it's not going to be able to do that if it goes back into reserves and comes in again. This is only a one-off tool that you have. You have to have over 50% of the army on the board to begin with, so there's only so much stuff you can put underground, although there are tricks and tools for putting 1 or 2 units into reserves after the fact, and those help you to get even more of the army into reserves if you need. Stuff with pre-game moves, so Atalan Jackals and Ridge Runners, needs to start visible and on the board in order to use its movement. So for those, they're a slightly different category, and they kind of fall separate to ambush or underground altogether. So you a lot of the time, especially with Ridge Runners and Bikers where you want that move, you want to have them out and about and have them visible. Now, the advantages to coming in from underground are several. 8 inches, with some of the boosts we can give our units to improve our charges, is a very makeable distance. So that means that opponents have to take our deep striking melee units very, very seriously. 6 inches away puts you in very nice range to use all of the range weapons that Genestealer Cults have as well. And it also means that it's very easy with the 6 inch closer deep strike to sneak units into corners to score secondaries in particular. You could score behind enemy lines very easily. You can score retrieve Nachman data very easily. You can score things like deploy teleport homers. A whole range of tricks and tools that very close deep strike helps you to pull off. It means that the opponent has a very hard time screening you altogether. There's always going to be some gaps somewhere that you can sneak in, and I think that reflects how GSC play in the lore and the way the army is supposed to function. It's worth saying that although 8 inch charges are better and more makeable, they are still very failable, so it's important to think about how you're going to buff your charges. Are you going to bring the Acolyte Icon Ward to give you a +1 to your charge? Are you going to use a Trap Sprung from the Proficient Planning, which we'll talk about in the next segment, to give you 3d6 and pick 2? These are some of the key ways in which you can make sure your very heavy hitting units are able to get to the places they're trying to get to. Different armies and different sub-factions will vary in the way they want to employ Conceal. It depends really how melee or shooting focused you want to be, but I think it's a fantastic tool that gives you enormous flexibility in the deployment phase and enormous flexibility to react to and respond to your opponent's tactics. Remember that everything needs to come in by round 3 if it is underground, so you need to have a plan for where stuff's coming in, and don't forget any units as well. So for playing a longer game, you want to use some of our other tools for putting units back into reserves, which we'll cover in a separate segment. So that is the gist of how the Deep Strike and Conceal rule goes. If you've had any particular mishaps or successes using this, please let us know in the comments. I'd be interested to hear how people get on. And I will see you back here again soon to discuss more of our specific rules, starting with the Proficient Planning upgrades. The jank is just getting started.